Welcome to Technology and Security. TS is a podcast exploring the intersections of emerging technologies and national security. I'm your host, Dr. Miah Hammond-Errey. I'm the founding CEO of Strat Futures Proprietary Limited and an adjunct associate professor at Deakin University. My guest today is Rohan Samaraweera. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Rohan Samaraweera has just founded Emrest, an AI advisory firm. He spent 25 years working in intelligence, national security and technology, and most recently he led enterprise AI and analytics capability for the Department of Home Affairs. Prior to that, he spent 16 years at the Australian Signals Directorate, including time overseas embedded with partners. He spent a year at the Harvard Kennedy School Belfer Centre on an Australian government fellowship researching AI and national security. I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Gadigal people. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and acknowledge their continuing connection to land, sea and community. Rohan, what is the tone of AI conversations inside government at the moment?
At the moment, there is a lot of conversation about the adoption of AI. There's been a big change since the emergence of ChatGPT or release of ChatGPT a couple of years ago. Prior to that, we were very much focused on building in-house capability in predictive analytics, computer vision, natural language processing, and network graph. But with the event of LMMs and ChatGPT, Claude, now our people have access to that technology and really want it. So the focus has changed from building in-house capabilities to how do we get these commercial capabilities into our agencies and how can we use them in supporting the national interest.
I read somewhere that you're a huge part of delivering Hermes, a national AI screening platform, which was recognised with the APS Data Science and Analytics Award in 2024. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so Hermes was a predictive model. So we applied experience and capability that was developed prior to me actually joining the department as well in the visa domain in applying predictive analytics to operational border operations. My predecessors had built capabilities in the visa risk domain system. Hermes was an application of similar approaches to international mail, following on the government getting industry data in the international mail space for the use of governing the border. So Hermes was applying all of the combined insights and detections of data of border officers and some of those that have led to results, and using that to train models to predict the potential risk of illicit drugs coming through or illicit items coming through the international mail space. So it's an application of traditional predictive analytics.
What was the impact? Because if anyone, for listeners who haven't been to an international mail sorting centre, I have had the pleasure earlier in my career. They're chaotic, right? There's thousands of packages coming through and being sorted and organised. So what was the impact coming out of this platform?
It did result in bringing or successfully identifying $300 or $400 million of street value drugs that were entering or going to Australia. We undertook some more analysis applying a lot of law enforcement agencies. You always say, hey, we took out $1 billion of drugs or $300 billion in this drug bust. What does that actually mean? And we applied or did some research in applying what that social impact was, so we can actually get some metrics that mattered, and using some of the research from University of New South Wales and Pennington Institute, where they've actually calculated the social harm of specific illicit drugs down to the gram, we were able to provide a rough estimate of impact of just that one targeting method, upwards of around $2 billion over a period of 3 or 4 years. So that certainly is quite a motivating achievement for the data science team, and it was a way that we could show what that impact is for the investment. Part of the challenge that we have, particularly with data science and AI, is that if we're successful, we do disrupt the status quo. And what that also means is that it's often hard to quantify what that return on investment is. It's often a case that the return on investment actually falls outside of your area. So if the ABF is really good at stopping drugs, $2 billion, they're not seeing that saving on their balance sheet. In fact, they may have to, increase investment to achieve that kind of impact in the community. And the actual cost saving of that achievement may be on someone else's balance sheet. And in this case, state and territory health and law enforcement areas. And that's a hard sell to take that to federal government and to the Department of Finance to say, well, here's our return on investment, because a lot of these AI capabilities and a lot of the focus around AI capabilities is how are you going to reduce costs within your organization? Whereas I think a broader view is much more important for the national interest. And we haven't found a good way to account for the returns, for the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important segue, because obviously recently the Prime Minister has announced that they'll have a new Office of AI. And so that's a new function that one hopes might be able to look across the whole of government and see some of those benefits and public value across, multiple competing areas and domains. Because as you say, to achieve genuine public good, we can't balance the sheets in one agency. They're going to be across state, territory, a range of different public services, and to make choices about the investment in specific platforms or applications, we actually really need to see what the whole downstream impact is, not just in the specific location the investment might be being spent in. Do you think it's a good outcome in terms of driving a better understanding of that kind of broader picture?
I hope so, but it's going to be a challenge, because it's going to take a bit of creativity and a bit of a broader look at, or asking a much more, applying curiosity towards these capabilities. And often, one of the challenges I've faced is you often get asked, what is the return on the work, on the resources that you're putting in? And often the answer to that is actually outside of my remit, or outside of, the team that's developed it, or even the agencies that developed its control. So there is a need for greater coordination in terms of broadening some of those relationships and partnerships, so that you can get those required metrics, you can close that feedback loop. One of the biggest challenges, and I think frustrations for those that have been building data science capabilities and AI capabilities, both in industry and the public sector, is that the investment to close that feedback loop, in some cases, is not there. A lot of the systems that we rely on as a nation or as an economy are ancient systems that you might have heard the term or phrase system archaeology, and that takes quite a bit of creativity, some MacGyvered solutions to really be able to solve that problem in terms of getting that feedback loop closed, which is critical for the governance of AI models going forward.
Robodebt is a stark cautionary tale of failed automated government decision-making. Did that failure change about how you think about automation and AI?
So Robodebt, for me, a lot of argument about whether it was AI or not, but it doesn't really matter, because what it essentially gets down to is it's the decisions and the infrastructure around, a technical process that was put in place. The structure and governance wasn't to the standard that we need for AI, was certainly not applied for Robodebt. And for me, as someone trying to uplift government standards within my remit, Robodebt was not only just a cautionary tale, but it was also a great support in terms of being able to have those conversations to do more, in terms of applying a process, a framework, and working through steps, and not just going out and building like a cool capability that's supporting a particular national security challenge or administrative challenge, but actually thinking about what is the purpose of, and why are we doing this, and is it legal? Does it meet and does it comply with current policy and legislation? Robodebt absolutely did raise a lot more awareness, across a broader range of people and actors involved. So while the instance of Robodebt has caused a lot of damage, it has helped that conversation move in the right direction in terms of putting governance and standards on the agenda and establishing a much more robust conversation, improve governance and manage risks in a more accountable manner.
I'm going to zoom right out at what's called the contest spectrum. What's a cooperation, competition, or conflict that you see coming in the Australian government use of AI or AI policy in the next 12 months?
So in Australian policy, in terms of cooperation, we're going to see a lot more cooperation between, I guess, non-AI superpowers. So between ourselves
Everyone
and other
that's not
states.
the US and China?
Yes, exactly. So, and that's going to be at a working level. I think there's been a lot of cooperation, certainly in the AI governance space, but where cooperation can provide a lot more value is in the deployment space. So that is in the realm of data collaborative, model developments outside of the frontier models. Let's just look at the other side of the coin in terms of that building, more specific sovereign capabilities. Certainly saw that from my time in government, where AI and data science provides real opportunities for partnerships. Each of our governments, each of our the systems and functions that are managed by government, a lot of the data collected is it's like having a sensor. So there is opportunity for partners to benefit from threats that we are much more aware and developed to protect against, and for a vice versa exchange of that protection. So I do see, particularly as a bit more concern over the concentration of power in the frontier model space. I do see that concern will drive more conversations really to diversify risk and support sovereignty and agency.
You're leading right to my next question. You've written that access to frontier AI is a dependency, not an asset. I agree, but talk us through your thinking here and why.
So there's two ways of looking at that problem. One is obviously at the national state level, in terms of having the ability and the agency to have not just have access to the technology, but also be able to use it. The same argument is true when it comes to outsourcing, even at a domestic level. When we're in government, the question that we all have to ask is, if I lost my key vendor, or if my contract workforce, left, what would my capability look like? So in terms of how I see sovereign capability, it's having that deployment muscle, that deployment infrastructure to be able to perform your function is the sovereign capability. And we need to safeguard that agency and be able to have the ability to not be, I guess, you probably heard the term vendor lock-in. It's the same at the state level in terms of having access to the sovereign models. We need to understand what those risks are, and we need to know how we could operate if we didn't have them. And at the same time, we need to have a plan B for those models as well. Well, not for the models, sorry, for those capabilities as well. One thing I would try and do would be just on an operational level, is I did reduce our reliance on the contract workforce, and where I did have a key contractor, having them shadowed by a junior APS person to manage and to develop their capabilities and to learn how to run those systems was really important. So we're going to need to build that kind of thinking in, across all of our engagements, and not just with government as well. I think if you're a company, you don't want to have your competitive advantage completely dependent on access to a model or a product or a system that you have no control over, and that could be taken away from you, without any warning.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from a national security perspective, it obviously comes fairly easily to us. Understand that the notion of critical dependency, I think it's taken industry quite a while to sort of reshift its focus to see to see how vulnerable it really is if it's reliant, and Mythos and Fable being cut off among many other examples. Even, the CrowdStrike outage, for example, provided tangible proof of what happens when you just don't have access. Obviously, there's a huge discussion in Australia at the moment about how we can increase, some people like the term agency. I don't, because I think it implies that it implies a simple trade-off, which allows you to ignore many of the fundamental inputs to that capability or agency. So, when we talk about something like data centers, we often see people say, well, if we have data centers here, then we will have more leverage. Now, I think data centers are a good thing, and I think we need data centers to be a part of, an evolving AI economy. But the way those data centers are structured and the access that Australians and Australian capabilities have to those is actually more important than the data center itself, if that makes sense. I've written about it in terms of the tech stack, but how do we think about securing aspects of AI or technology stacks for Australian sovereignty?
So that's a really good point, and particularly on the data centers. Yeah, having them on our sovereign territory certainly is going to enable the traditional view of data sovereignty, which is you want to have your data stored on your onshore. You don't want to be giving sensitive data and hosting that offshore on a foreign-owned platform in a foreign location, but that only supports, I guess, part of the picture. In this space, it's what kind of stakes do we have in terms of using those capabilities for our own purposes? What kind of agreements, can we put in place, and can we negotiate with the foreign investment that comes in to make sure that there is a portion that's being provided to support Australia's national security, to support our innovation ecosystem, to support our institutions, our academic institutions and their research programs as well. There is a massive competition for getting, GPUs and compute, and, the hyperscalers aren't building data centers in Australia to support our sovereign capability. They're building them for their own purposes.
Yeah.
And they're
have their commercially own viable.
And yeah, exactly. So, how do we have stake in that regard? And Australia's had some good historic experience in negotiating treaties with our allies in terms of making sure that we have stakes, where we do in some cases have Australians, working embedded in highly sensitive, important programs for our allies, where we are a true partner. The question is, how do you do that with a foreign commercial entity? Because commercial entities can pull out of Australia for commercial reasons as well. And the other question is, who does that negotiation? Is that something that government does? It's quite a challenging proposition where you do see that the diffusion of power, where, 20 years ago it would be between state actors, and that's a lot more predictable. But now that we've got a lot
arguably.
Yeah, arguably. Whereas now we've got companies, multinationals, international companies that have a lot more power than they did, 20 or 30 years ago.
So how do you see that countries like Australia can engage either in the current, AI or even broader technology economies and future ones without simply replicating those dependencies on foreign platforms and companies?
So Australia has to build its own assets and build and protect its own assets. So we're talking data, the human expertise, and that deployment infrastructure to be able to apply AI for our own commercial security and service purposes.
Everyone's focusing so much on LLMs and frontier models. I'm not discounting that, but there is a really big opportunity here for us to focus on building small, reliable AI systems that actually work for the purpose that we want them for. Offering small companies and research institutions the compute capacity to innovate new and exciting things. We don't have to compete at the frontier LLM space. Yet there's just so much focus about that rather than where can we start investment?
Well, you've basically just identified the main frustration for a lot of the data science, artificial intelligence community. I do often have people reaching out from small, small startups and companies that are doing, trying to build service industries using AI. using small language models, building their own in-house capability. And they do feel like the focus has moved away, and it is a bit of a distraction, I think, from the main game. And I would agree with you in terms of focusing in on, what data do we have that's unique? And Australia has a lot of very good range of domains and sectors where we are world leaders. We have great talent in the country. We do have a lot of really good talent in the AI domain. And when it comes to infrastructure, we have the deployment infrastructure in Australia to solve Australian problems. The LMMs have stolen a lot of the limelight and a lot of the discussion and a lot of the attention, and it's taking it away from areas of focus where we were doing some hard work. Well, the country, people working in AI and data in Australia have been working on maturing the capability and building the deployment, muscle here. And the conversation has sort of shifted to, a lot of the debate and the media is about, how do we get access to these big systems? But at the end of the day, LMMs aren't going to grant fees identify drugs in mail, and they're not going to improve the precision of a guidance weapon in the defence space. Work has to be done in other areas for high trust sovereign systems that solve specific problems that we need solved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such an important point to bring it back to the purpose rather than trying to retrofit an existing capability onto something to make it AI scalable. The idea is actually to solve the problem by using AI that works for the problem that you have. And it sounds so simple, but so often in the technology space, we get caught up in what's shiny and new rather than focusing back on the essentials of what is the purpose? What are we actually trying to solve here? And that is such a critical point because so many of the difficult problems that we need to solve and the public good outcomes from government are not about things that you can retrofit an LLM or some other, model. There's something that you need to purpose build something for. I run a startup and we have a scalable AI component to our platform. If that component isn't available, we can use other capabilities internally. If you rely on that too much, you're then in a position where your scalable platform is now critically dependent. That doesn't bode well. If we want to shape Australia's AI future, what do we need to think about and put in place now?
We need to think about how we invest in AI. Other countries are investing and putting billions of dollars towards AI. We need to think about investing in building, in matching the good work we've done in terms of governance with investment. Sometimes that compliance is going to take investment in terms of training people. Sometimes it's going to take investment in terms of potentially replacing an old obsolete system that has really bad data. It's going to require investment to close that feedback loop and do some, change the architecture, as well as invest in new capabilities to measure what those impacts and results are. We certainly need to look at how we support our educational institutions, how we bed down governance infrastructure and standards, and how we measure result, how we invest in developing an ecosystem or an innovation ecosystem that is able to get success in deploying AI and creating real impacts in our community, our society, and our economy as well.
What are some of the interdependencies and vulnerabilities between AI and security that you wish were better understood?
I wish that it was better understood what the impact of our human workforce is in AI. There's a lot of talk about automating whole jobs and reducing the numbers of our people, not just in government, but in companies as well. And we've all seen the stories of the startup or the technology company that sacked a whole bunch of people, then asked them to come back. I wish it was better understood that people are a critical part of operating and running AI to achieve outcomes. And it's only, if you deploy AI against a particular national security problem, what happens, we all know, your adversary will change tactics and there will be a new pattern And that pattern may not be something that, it may be something that AI sees, but it may not be something that AI necessarily can identify. I'll give you an example. So hanging out at the International Mail Centres with ABF staff, one of my visits, the ABF officer picked up a package off the conveyor belt and just stuck it straight onto the relevant pile for a partner to come and take away, and without even opening it. And I asked him why he did that, and he said, "Oh, that is this substance. It comes from this person. I see them come through all the time. I just pick them up and stick them straight onto the pile." And sure enough, he was right. It was the exact substance that he said was going to be in it. Now, I had to ask a question, like, if you're always picking up those packages, why are they still being sent? And the answer to that question is probably that there's a whole lot more packages like that are getting through the system when that particular ABF officer isn't on, or if it goes through another mail centre where that particular, I guess, signature or that particular style of package is not necessarily understood. So we built a system in terms of being able to identify, explore the idea that you could actually identify packages by sight. So imagine that officer picks up that package, logs it, and then we have a system set up that computer vision system that goes and identifies all those different packages. The adversary is going to change, but it's probably going to be the border officer or someone else on that border officer's team that's going to either see what that change is, or alternatively, you might see a reflection through a different channel. Those are out-of-the-box events or impacts where human problem solving and thinking is going to be key. We need to value our human expertise. And I guess my frustration with the current debate and the current focus on automation is that it is missing that critical part that I, as someone who's been part of a team that's been building and deploying these capabilities, sees that criticality of having humans in that as a core part of the AI infrastructure.
Which brings me perfectly to another segment, which is emerging tech for emerging leaders. What then are the limitations of AI you wish leaders currently understood to help bring in this human perspective?
You ask very good questions, Miah. So the limitations of AI really get down to that they're only as good as the data that they're trained on, as well as how they're tuned and how they are constructed. And that really does get down to the skill of the people building those capabilities, as well as the data sets that we are able to have access to, and the quality of that data, and the provenance of that data as well. The other limitation is that I'm speaking from my experience within very specific channels and very specific capabilities, and they can't necessarily adapt to a black swan event or to external sharp changes that might come through. They might pick up patterns over time, but those big shocks are where human expertise comes to a fore.
What does meaningful AI oversight actually require from government, and how is it different to business?
I think both government and business need to embed AI governance into their capabilities as they're being built. It's very difficult to apply a standard and then retrospectively fix all of the infrastructure you put in place that might not be up to speed or might not be up to standard. So it's really important to embed AI assurance at that ground level, and to do it from when you are starting to right to the point of identifying the purpose that you will want to apply AI.
2024 Independent Intelligence Review called for an AI leadership focus and an uplift in awareness and education across the community. What's happening in this space, and what do Australian and Five Eye AI governance forums and frameworks look like?
When it comes to executive AI literacy, there's been a lot of development in terms of creating training for senior executives to learn about AI. In terms of frameworks, there's been a lot of work in developing standards, a lot of engagement across the APS in building AI frameworks.
I'm going to go to a segment called Grounded. What should we stay focused on and connected to this year, given the pace of change?
I think we need to not get too head up in trying to keep track of, all of the AI models that are going out and all of the announcements. And I think we need to really focus in on ourselves in terms of our own capability. For leaders, one of the biggest problems biggest challenges that we face is we aren't terribly good at identifying or articulating what our strategic challenges are in a way that can then start that discussion about AI. There's a lot of discussion about how do we apply AI, and there is a lot of work going into identifying use cases. A lot of the time, those use cases that come out are quite peripheral to our actual core strategic problems. And we are timid when it comes to applying AI against some of those key strategic problems that we do need solved.
I want to go to another segment on alliances. What relationships should Australia and Australian companies focus on?
We should be focused on building an innovation ecosystem that provides that infrastructure for advancing AI across the various different domains. So rather than focusing in on, can we get access to ChatGPT or Fable or Mythos, we need to be building these broad-based communities where we have government, universities, corporates, we have an entrepreneurial community, and we have finance as well, all operating. And we have, to build that infrastructure so that we have the mechanisms in place to advance AI, to develop and build new capabilities, to commercialize capabilities here in Australia, to have a market here to build capability. And there's definitely a lot that large institutions, whether it's government or potentially our financial sector, can invest in companies that are promoting and developing innovation.
Let's go to another segment. It's called Disconnect. How do you wind down and unplug?
Finally, an easy question. I love cooking, and I also, like a lot of your former guests, very much enjoy getting out into the outdoors. I like bikepacking and hiking, and I'm a bit of a gear nerd when it comes to that, in terms of I have way too many bicycles and I have way too many tents, but they're all designed to do very, very specific things and go to very, very specific places, having the right tool for the right job. The other thing I'm doing a bit more is I'm actually, I wouldn't say torturing, but I am trying to teach my kids using the Socratic method so that they
would absolutely say you're torturing them, just by the way.
Yes, they would. So where I ask my sons lots of questions to help them guide them through getting to the right answer. I think that's really important, particularly where increasingly we don't have to dig too hard to get answers and information because technology is so good. So building that muscle so that people can do it. My sons can do it.
I run a cognitive readiness platform helping leaders to think, improve their cognitive performance under pressure. And absolutely, that is something that I advocate for. I want to go to one of my last two segments. It's called Eyes and Ears. What have you been reading, listening to, or watching lately that might be of interest to my audience?
I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and occasionally those podcasts lead me to authors. So the newest author that's popped up on my list has been a man called David Epstein. He's written a book called Inside the Box, which really talks about how constraints can enhance creativity. Really interesting premise, and something that resonates with me in terms of some of the capability, some of the experience I've had professionally, where some of our best results have been in very, very resource constrained environments. And the really good case study that he uses is actually Dr. Seuss. I did not realize that The Cat in the Hat was written on a bet to where Dr. Seuss was told, you're going to write a book and it has to be 50 words or less. And he said, right, I'll take that. And he wrote The Cat in the Hat. And we have, one of the best-selling books in, human history. I keep track of an economist called Eric Brynjolfsson, and I know that a lot of people in the AI space refer to him. He wrote a book called The Second Machine Age a few years ago, which really talked about and really explained how electrification changed our society and really improved living standards across the board. But it also talked about how it took 30 years to move from the previous industrial age to electrification, getting to the point where we have, consumer electric goods actually took 30 years because I did try to retrofit electrification into their existing infrastructure and mills and whatnot, which has a lot of resonance for me in terms of trying to put AI into these existing systems using old methods. So that resonates with me.
My final segment is need to know. Is there anything I didn't ask you that would have been great to cover?
It would have been. I think it would have been great to go into a bit more depth into how organizations innovate, like the difference between trying to innovate from the inside to being, between entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. I think there's some real challenging insights in that space that
So take me
would
there.
have been good.
What is
good to
the
cover.
difference between entrepreneurship, and what can we take away from it?
There's a concept called the one no versus one yes problem or paradox. And that is that if I was an entrepreneur, if I was, Steve Jobs, all I need to get started is one yes. And I can go out into the big wide world and I can find that yes anywhere. So I can drop round to my mother's and say, hey, mum, me and my other mate, Steve, we want to rock up and can we have your garage? We want to set up our own computer company. And she says yes, then, that's a step forward. If I need funding, I can go to a VC. If they say no, I can go to another VC. I can find an angel investor. All I need to keep going is find yes. And the challenge is, where do you find that yes? That's out there. It's out there. You just need to go and find it. When you're trying to innovate on the inside, all it takes to stop you in your tracks is one no. And that one no can come from anyone. It can come from the secretary of your agency. That could come from your CEO at the high level, or it could come from someone very, very junior, someone who doesn't give you access to a data set or doesn't give you access, or a system administrator doesn't give you access to a system. And so the challenge there for entrepreneurs is that we have to try and reduce the probability of those no's. And we have to be constantly problem solving and working through all of those challenges, as well as building a coalition of partners who are willing to help advance that capability. There is a real challenge in, you often hear, businesses saying, well, it must be easy in government. It's actually quite a difficult proposition to innovate in an organization. There is one more point though, Miah, actually, and that's probably a really, really important one, which is we have a phenomenal problem, and maybe this is the answer to the question about what I wish people knew about AI, and that is that I wish that institutions understood that responsibility for AI is actually shared across a whole range of different areas. Who is responsible for AI is probably one of the hardest questions to answer in any organization. And the truth of AI adoption is that it actually belongs to multiple people when it comes to an AI capability, and understanding what is this capability for, who is the business owner and user of that capability, how's it going to change our workforce, what's its impact going to be from a resource perspective, cybersecurity, all of those other impacts as well. And that's probably the biggest challenge when it comes to AI governance as it stands.
Rohan, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the Technology and Security podcast.
Thank you very much, Miah. Really appreciated the opportunity.
TS listeners, I will be in Rome at the NATO Defence College doing some research until 2027, but I'll keep hosting Technology and Security, so listen out for my upcoming European guests. Thanks for listening to Technology and Security. I've been your host, Dr. Miah Hammond-Errey. This podcast is brought to you by Strat Futures. If there was a moment you enjoyed today or a question you have about the show, send an email to the address in the show notes. Please rate, review, and subscribe to help promote technology and security.